Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everyone. So I'm not going to pretend I'm telling you things that you don't already know and that you don't already do. But like all these sessions, hopefully there's something in here from my experience of COVID and the way we had to adapt and change and what we're now sticking with and continuing with. Hopefully there's something in here that resonates and may well be of use. Please do feel free to shout out with any points or questions as we go through. And first things first, I should point out I spent ages making sure this is all on one line, and then I turn up, it's been condensed. So don't judge me on that. Okay, so yeah, as you just heard, I've been at Bennington for 7 years or so, running the marketing and comms team. I used to be a journalist, and then I had a couple of years working in comms up at a particularly high-profile slash dodgy council where I was doing a lot of crisis comms. And what I've learned, particularly at Bennington, is the value of managing and communicating with all these different competing stakeholders. We've all got loads of different stakeholders that we're always trying to essentially keep happy. And the pandemic, for all its obvious downsides, has been kind of useful as far as I see it in terms of how we can engage with many of our stakeholders. So the reason I'm talking today is I was asked to speak because the general consensus was that we did a pretty decent job, I think, as a sector through the pandemic. And we run regular parent surveys at Bennington, and we were very pleased to get a 92% approval rating from our parents as to how, as a school, we operated during COVID. So as a result of that, and as a result of obvious sort of reviewing what we do at all times, we are continuing to adopt some of the things that we started during COVID. I've distilled this down into top 10 lessons that I've learnt. Hopefully some of these are, as I say, quite useful. Okay, so number one is no return to normal. So this is probably the most obvious one. Digital obviously isn't going away. COVID has forced us to be where we would have been in 5-10 years' time anyway. And I suppose if anyone says to you in a sort of gleeful way, brilliant, the pandemic's over, we can go back to doing it X, Y, Z, I think we're kidding ourselves. If we think that all of a sudden all parents are going to be able to attend all events, if we think all prospective parents are going to be able to come to our school in person, if we think all governors are going to come to governors meetings on site, it's just not going to happen. We now operate from the approach of basically all events in school should be live streamed as a default. Obviously, that's not always possible. Sports Day is coming up. That's probably not one that we're going to try and live stream just yet, although I have been asked if we can film and put highlights on a digital board somewhere. But things like Speech Day, even things like daily assemblies, we're continuing to live stream because you've always got staff who can't attend, you've always got students who can't attend. As a boarding school, we've always got a proportion of kids who are in the medical centre or unwell in the house, or they're overseas and they can't physically get here. So to ensure that our community is as engaged and feels as much of a community as possible, we are continuing to live stream the vast majority of our events. Comes with challenges, obviously. It's additional resource, additional effort. That's kind of become the norm, and I can't see that going away as a sort of expectation. Number two, open mornings. Now, I'm veering slightly into external comms territory here, and I've been asked to talk about internal comms, but I couldn't resist on the open mornings thing. So again, somebody said to me a few weeks ago, they said, oh, you must be delighted. You don't have to do virtual open mornings anymore. And I was slightly taken aback. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Because for me, obviously it's wonderful that we've got physical human beings coming onto our beautiful sites and experiencing our schools as they should be experienced. But what we found during the pandemic, and I'm sure many of you are thinking the same thing, is but by offering virtual open mornings, we were getting prospective parents at an earlier stage in the process. So we're down in Kent. We're hour and a half, 2 hours from London. To come down for an open day, have a tour, listen to the speeches, etc., etc. It's half a day, if not an entire day, which is wonderful because we're fortunate to have a wonderful site, and it's all obviously part of the experience. But you have to be reasonably wedded to the concept of Bellenden, and certainly reasonably wedded to the concept of boarding and independent schools to frankly bother getting in the car and devoting 4 or 5 hours of your day to that visit. Whereas when we were running virtual events, and we continue to run virtual events, we're getting parents who are just at those sort of first-time buyers that everyone's after. Those first-time buyers who aren't used to necessarily used to boarding or necessarily used to independent schools, didn't attend independent school themselves maybe, don't know a great deal about it, might maybe feel a little bit sort of morally torn on the idea of independent schools or boarding schools. And if they can just jump on a virtual call in the evening, see what they think of our head and our director of boarding or some of our students on an hour-long virtual call, it acts as a sort of new filter, if you like. So at that point, we'll lose some, but then others will stay with us and think, actually, I want to learn more, and then they'll have a good trawl through the website, and then they might come down and visit us. So that's what we're finding. So we're still doing virtual open mornings, open events, and what they tend to look like are sort of pitched as find out a bit more about independent schools or boarding schools. We've done a couple in collaboration with Tunbridge recently, because we're an all-girls school. Tunbridge are all boys. We work quite closely together. We have quite a lot of families who have boys at Tunbridge and girls at Bellenden. And yeah, we just find those are quite useful for giving prospective parents an early insight into what an independent school can offer. Staff comms. Picking up from what Michael was saying upstairs just now, clearly keeping staff happy is an enormously important aspect of what we all do. Again, we've gone back to having our in-person staff meetings each week, but we are still live streaming them. And that's because, again, it's become accepted during COVID that actually it's pretty easy to stick a camera up and live stream it through Teams. It's more convenient for staff. You can never get the entire staff body together in one place, because you've always got people who need to teach the kids, or look after the kids, or be feeding them, or be cleaning, or doing marketing. So by live streaming it, sending out a recording afterwards, it's just far more convenient for those who can't be there in person, for those who aren't well enough to be there in person, those who are isolating, those who feel uncomfortable being in a space with lots of people. And that I can't see that stopping for possibly ever, certainly for the foreseeable future. It's also a lot easier and quicker, we find. If we've got something that we need to announce or share with staff that sort of we need to get out to parents reasonably quickly, we don't have a scheduled staff meeting before that announcement, and we really should be telling staff about this before parents. It's a lot easier to just call a quick online meeting and people can join it, rather than going through the kind of rigmarole of booking a space and summoning everyone to a big in-person event, which can feel a little bit sort of OTT and potentially a bit sort of scary. It also means that other events that we're doing aside from staff meetings, so if we've got a guest speaker joining us virtually, for example, we're finding we're getting far greater staff engagement in our events, because, again, it's that convenience factor. They can watch it while they're at home in the evening, or they can watch a recording of it. Which brings me neatly on to. We found that being able to offer online events has vastly widened our pool of guest speakers. We managed to get, for the first time, I've been at Bellenden for 7 years, and we've just had our first 2 Labour politicians speak to us. So we had David Lammy a little while ago, joining us remotely. He was really good. And we had a chap called Ian Lucas, who used to be a Welsh Labour MP, coming and speaking to us. Now, I don't know whether they would have come down physically in person. We've been trying for many years to just ensure as best we can that our students are having a balance of guest speakers, especially on the political spectrum. And of course, again, it's a convenience thing for those guest speakers themselves. As I say, if they're London-based, that's a good 4 hours out of your day to come down to us, speak, hang around for a while, chat to the kids, and then go again. Whereas, they can hop on a call for 40 minutes, an hour during lunch breaks in the evening. We had an Indian billionaire tech CEO join us recently from India, and we had to shuffle the diary around that day and hold it during the day, during lunchtime, because that's the only time she could do, and we just really wanted our students to hear from her. And yeah, we're just finding that as much as we really like the in-person guest speakers, and we are still getting some really good high-profile speakers, the pool has just widened enormously by being able to do these remotely. This is one of those where we crushed it. So it's more than one partnership. This, again, probably an obvious point, but this also has the benefit of reaching a wider audience. Partner schools are joining our events without us having to go through the rigmarole of trying to lay on coaches and working out who's going to pay for the coach to bring the students from the academy down to us. How we solve that constant frustration of our lessons finish at 5:30 and the students at the academy that we sponsor, they finish their lessons at 3:30. Can we ask those kids to stay on at school for 2 hours to then come over to us to do an event? And it's all a bit messy. Whereas, again, going back to guest speakers, we're sharing that link with loads of our partner schools. We run an annual Oxbridge information session for our students, but also that's now being shared out with all of our local schools, regardless of whether we sort of consider them partners or not. As part of our ambition that we're trying to help any child, regardless of which school they go to. So when we have, it's an admissions tutor for Oxford come and talk to us. Again, that's remote, and we're live streaming it to dozens of our local schools. We're doing similar with lots of other careers events for our students, which we're sharing with lots of other schools. It's obviously not the only or indeed the best way of improving our partnerships working. But it's hopefully a really useful sort of little extra for those schools, for those students at those schools, to be able to join some of our virtual events. Okay, this is probably the big one. The real benefit for me has been the huge increase in communications with parents. Now, during the pandemic, we ran untold numbers of sort of live Q&A sessions for our parents, even more so for our overseas parents. And we were talking about the latest COVID update, how we were responding to whatever the latest was. We were, we by chance during COVID announced a couple of reasonably significant strategic initiatives. So we introduced what we're calling day boarders, day pupils for the first time in the school's history. And we also, as a result of COVID and seeing how well the sort of year group bubbling worked, we've introduced a house dedicated to our fourths, our year sevens, whereas previously we'd all had mixed houses. And as part of those announcements, we were running information events with parents where they could come on, run it as a Q&A session. They're asking the head and other members of our senior management team all sorts of questions about these announcements. And parents seem to really value that as a sort of direct access to the head and others being able to put across their point of view, to ask their questions. It just felt like a really collaborative way of running things. In fact, on Saturday we ran what will probably become an annual event now. We ran an in-person but also live-streamed parent information session, which was essentially a sort of annual, almost like a sort of annual business update. So our head was giving a sort of strategic summary of where we'd set out to be 5 or so years ago, where we've got to with various developments and curriculum changes and, as I say, some of these boarding structure changes. And again, gave parents the opportunity to ask either live or through the live stream, to ask any questions that they want. We did ask parents to submit questions in advance, as well as being able to ask there and then. But it meant we could cover off, it meant we could cover off some of the issues that were emerging, some of the questions that parents had on their mind. We could cover those off during the presentation itself. And also it gave us I suppose a flavour, a heads up of what was on parents' minds, because what it showed me on Saturday was we spend a lot of time trying to preempt what parents might think or might worry about or might be concerned about, and inevitably, I planned all sorts of potentially defensive lines about this, that, and the other strategic initiative. The majority of questions were around when can we spruce up some bathrooms in one of the boarding houses, and when are we going to get back to having lots of social events with boys' schools, which we are doing, and it was more a point of we need to encourage your daughters to actually sign up for these social events. But those weren't ones that we preempted. So yeah, it was a really useful exercise to ask parents to send through their questions in advance. We've also run various focus groups with parents. So, in fact, I had one a couple of weeks ago because I'm reviewing various things in the marketing and comms team. We're looking at our magazine, which I'll come on to shortly. And again, using our Parents Association as a bit of a sounding board has been incredibly useful. We've been doing our new pupil days online. So again, it's a kind of extra sort of early touch point, if you like, with the incoming new pupils. We're running a sort of meet the HM type event. Obviously not replacing the physically coming into school and finding out which house you're going into and meeting your HM and meeting your dorm mates. But yeah, it's a nice way, again, convenient for the parents in the evening. The HM comes on and spends 4 or 5 minutes talking about their house and their house culture. Okay. Parent mornings. Now, this is obviously something of a sensitive area. And you can never please everyone. So we ran a survey for our parents, asking them. We've got I can't remember which year group it was. I think it may well have been the 5th. So we said, we got the parent morning coming up. Would you rather come down in person and sit in front of your teacher face to face, or would you rather do it online? And we had a wonderful 50-50 split of what the parents wanted to do. So we did both. I think we'll probably end up doing both. It was a little bit, complex, I suppose, in running a hybrid event in that way. But we kept the sign-up booking system the same. So we use School Cloud, which I'm sure many of you do. So parents still had to book their slots through that system. And then basically we had a sort of couple of hours where teachers were reserved for in-person visits, and a couple of hours after that for the live stream sort of style of it. And I suppose that the reality is we're probably going to need to be operating like this as we move forward. Clearly, again, you can't please everyone. So some teachers prefer the face-to-face. Some teachers prefer being remote. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where, again, for sort of convenience for the parents and just for offering a really top service to our customers, it's what we're going to need to keep doing. A benefit we found of having gone through the pandemic when all such events were held remotely is that I think parents have got used to that sort of horrible countdown clock, and then they get cut off after 5 minutes or whenever their slot ends. So we're finding actually that those face-to-face conversations are now more succinct and efficient and meaningful. There's probably less chat at the beginning. And it makes it, it sort of empowers teachers a little bit more for when the conversation is getting a bit longer, a bit more in depth, to cut off and say, I'm very sorry, I'm going to have to leave it there. Let's pick this up at another time, because everyone's got kind of used to that. Now, presenting live on an online platform has really suddenly become a valuable life skill. We all picked it up probably in a matter of days as we're heading towards lockdown in April 2020. It was obviously a huge challenge for teachers in particular, from going to sort of 0 to 100% of lessons being delivered remotely in a few days. And what I saw was those sort of go-to colleagues who we'd always want to put in front of parents because they were brilliant at presenting and who really came across really fantastically well. Some of those struggled when it was an entirely different environment and they were sat at home and they were presenting through a camera into the void and they couldn't see the audience and all the rest of it. So it's become a really valuable life skill for all of us as staff, and particularly so for our students. So, as I was saying earlier, we're increasingly being able to welcome guest speakers remotely. And I've now got sixth formers sort of competing with one another to be hosting events. So we had Jacob Rees-Mogg a little while ago. We've had Dido Harding, who ran the Test and Trace program. We had some of the creators of the AstraZeneca vaccine and various other notable, really interesting people being interviewed live by our students, which we were live streaming. And how we've been running those is we've had a live audience in one of our lecture theatres, so that at least the guest speaker can see that there are some human beings actually on the call. And then live streaming that to other year groups and our entire community, basically, our parents and our alumni and our partner schools as well. And it's become such a valuable skill for some of those sixth formers to be interviewing really prominent people in front of their peers in a live scenario. And again, it's one of those things that really hopefully helps them when it comes to applying for whatever university they want, or another string to their bow when it comes to entering the workplace. Clearly, the overseas market has been a huge beneficiary of our rush towards embracing live streaming. Obviously, local restrictions mean they can't get back physically for all sorts of events, and we found that it's helping them to feel even more part of our community than they perhaps used to. So, as I was saying, going back to some of those sort of COVID briefings we were doing, or those sort of strategic updates, Q&A session with the head and an SMT, we've got all parents, and especially overseas parents, feeling rightly as if they're sort of closer to our senior leadership team than ever before, which can only be a good thing. Now, as a former newspaper editor, I'm on the fence with this one. So clearly, yes, is probably the answer to that. Obviously, we're in an increasingly digital world. Websites are the new prospectus. We all know that. It's funny to always have the conversation, as I was having a few times yesterday, about who still prints prospectuses and who's winding them down. We're having the conversation at the moment about our termly magazine that we do. Actually do twice a year because we found that spring was too challenging. So yeah, we twice a year we produce a really glossy sort of what we think is high-end magazine summarising everything that's been going on, and we're currently reviewing it, and I'm probably being the dinosaur, harping on about the old argument of, but we need it on a coffee table so that people see it, and it smacks of quality and prestige and all the rest of it. And we'll probably end up continuing to print it in some form, mainly for our prospective parents, I think. But this was coming anyway, obviously. I know we were all pre-COVID reviewing what print publications we did, and the whole prospectus debate and everything else. But it's certainly been exacerbated, I find, certainly at Benenden. And for the first time, I've got parents questioning whether we should be printing some of this stuff from a financial point of view, as well as from a, obviously sort of environmental point of view. And they're right, these are conversations we need to be having. So yeah, I sit on the fence on that one, reviewing everything that we do. One thing that we have done is we've stopped producing. We used to give everyone who turned up for our sports matches on a Saturday, we used to give them a little, slightly half-hearted print-out flyer saying, "Welcome to Benenden. These are the sports matches going on. Here's a map," type thing. And now we've got QR codes instead, and it's a far slicker. They don't get wet when it rains. So that's something we've embraced. And our plan on that front is to also have digital boards around the school, directing, visiting parents to where they need to go, because that's one of our main sort of challenges is, parents come on site and then we've got quite a big site, and finding where they've got to go can be a challenge. So print is, I've just left that with a question mark, and I'm afraid that's not one where I'm sort of sharing any particular pearls of wisdom beyond, we're trying to cut down on printed products wherever we can. And that was it, really. So thank you very much indeed. As I say, hopefully there's something in there that's of some use as we come out of the pandemic. But it sort of changed forever how we do things. I'm very happy to take any questions. Yes.
How are you manning that level of live streaming, and has it impacted your marketing workload?
It's impacted my workload. We've been reasonably good at training up enough people to be able to sort of share the load out. It's not quite where I'd want it. I'm probably still involved in more than I need to be. But I've now got about, across different teams, we've now got about 4, 5, 6 people who can confidently run an event without sort of too many problems. We do need to roll out some training so that more people can do it. But the careers are now sort of running their own events. My events coordinator can now very happily run an event. When there's a big one involving lots of parents, involving lots of SMT, it makes sense to always have myself on it, as well as making sure. One tip I would share is we use Teams Live, and we always make sure we've got 2 producers on that call. So in case someone's Wi-Fi drops out or we have a power cut or whatever, there's always someone who can pick up the event. Thankfully, it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen at some stage. So it doesn't come without additional resource, I'm afraid. But it's something that I think we need to be doing.
Just as a kind of guide, going back to a virtual open morning, how often do you now hold those, and do you sort of granularise them as according to entry point, or are they very general?
Yeah, pretty general. They're very much a sort of early stage. This is what Benenden is. We offer entry at these different points. Come and find out more about it if you'd like to. We're looking to do those sort of one every term type thing. We do. I should caveat that with we do lots of open mornings physically. We probably do more than most schools. We've traditionally done that because of our location. You know, we are, as I say, an hour and a half or so outside London. So it's we found that just it benefits parents to sort of come down at their convenience.
Is your overall open morning offering greater than it was if you add your
Yeah. So we haven't removed any face to face. We've added one in. So, yes.
If you were live streaming a concert, for example, what kind of equipment are you using to give you the sound and vision for that?
Concerts are something that we haven't yet mastered. So we record them pretty well. We've got a tech guy in the music team who's filming them on. I'm not sure what spec of camera he's got. He's got some nice, 4 HD camera. But we're about to open our new school hall and music school, which has got all sorts of AV facilities in it. So yeah, when we can get in there in the next few weeks, that's going to be our next big challenge is to live stream those in a really professional way, because part of our new music school and school hall is going to be commercialising it, frankly, and sharing it with the wider community. So if you've got ticket paying public live streaming something, it's got to be professional. So sorry, that was a politician's answer of we haven't nailed it yet, but we will. Yeah, please do. Hi.
Hi, from an internal comms perspective, we're a smallish prep school. I think keeping our staff informed about everything that's going on is really difficult. How do you guys handle that? Is it just emails that are sent out?
No, so we do a weekly in-person staff meeting.
Right.
We send out a weekly bulletin, which the idea of that is that it contains all the emails that would have been sent out in one easy to read bulletin. And actually, I was quite pleased recently. We do a staff survey every couple of years, and the bulletin is far better read than I thought it would be. From experience at previous workplaces, I kind of assumed everyone sort of it came into their inbox, they rolled their eyes, and they moved on with their lives. People really read it. It probably helps that at the end we've got a miscellaneous section where people are advertising all sorts of weird things. You know, if you want to, I don't know, buy a new Hoover, or if you want a discount on this, mate's coffee house, etc., etc. But then, yeah, if there's something that falls in between those two, we'll call a quick online sort of catch-up session. And then, yeah, we do always record and send out a link to the live staff meeting for those who can't attend.
And how do you deal when you live stream an event with those parents who said that they don't want their children to be photographed or recorded? Because that's what's stopped us live streaming certain events.
Okay, depends who you're live streaming to, I suppose. So if you're just live streaming to the to your parent community, then your photo permissions that cover your internal photo permissions are fine. We're not live streaming a great deal of stuff involving the students, to be honest. So we're doing a lot of SMT and the head. When we've got the guest speaker events and they're being interviewed by a particular student, if one of those students is on our can't use list, then we'll get permission in advance to make sure that that's all okay. Does that answer?
I think I thought that you were like live streaming things that parents might want to see but didn't.
No, so we haven't started live streaming. So things like Sports Day, we haven't started live streaming. I suppose that would be the holy grail of live streaming Sports Day. Speech Day, we've live streamed, but we're treating it as an internal event. So it's no different to a parent coming and watching that child. They can't download, I should point out. So they can't download the recording. There's a restriction on that. So they can live stream, but can't take it forward.
Sorry, how do you know that they are just, is it because it's a unique link, or do they have to log in? Like, how do you, I'm just thinking of some of these parents who are very, how could we reassure them that it's an internal event? And
Yeah, so it's behind a password. So the link we send out can only be accessed by those who have got a parent portal login, basically.
Do you have a speech day or that kind of thing, and is that going to be live streamed?
Yes, yeah, it is. We did, so for the past 2 years, we've live streamed our speech day. The first one was completely remote for obvious reasons, and then last year it was a 6-2 only event, but we live streamed to the rest of the school. It involved a lot of IT kit and about 3 cameras and what have you. But actually, Teams Live, which we use, is its broadcast quality, sort of production and choosing of camera angles and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but there is some tech implications that you need if you're in a marquee or something.
And this time when you do it, a sort of, are you having a live and virtual?
Yeah.
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 So it'll be a hybrid.
Yeah, it'll be hybrid. And to be fair, our focus is always on the in-person audience. I mean, frankly, that event that I referred to on Saturday with the parent information session, actually the live stream wasn't great because it was in the theatre, and in the theatre you've got the massive lights and you've always got the theatre techs who rightly want the experience of those in the theatre to be as great as it can be. So our live stream wasn't really anything more than a sort of laptop camera live streaming the sound and the picture that it was seeing. So it was all a bit washed out and the sound was a bit clunky. So that's something we'll look at. But actually, not that I don't want to broadcast sort of poor quality live streams, but if the experience of attending in person is better, then that's probably not a bad thing. But yeah, if there's a live stream that's not great, then we want to make it a bit better for next time. Was there anything else?
Sorry,
Hi.
this might be a very obvious question. Are you live streaming to Teams? So do you have to access Teams in order to see the live stream?
Yeah, but you don't need a Teams log on to see it.
Right.
So yeah, Teams made that improvement reasonably quickly after lockdown when they realised they were being trounced by Zoom. So yeah, you can send out a link and you can go on and view it without any faff. It can be a little bit problematic sometimes if you're overseas on a sort of old Internet Explorer browser. Like all these things, it's better with Chrome or Edge. Yeah. Don't you? All right, fine. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.